Welcome to Nurture the Soul. I am your host. My name is Reverend Ellie Hutchison, and I am the Minister for Congregational and Community Engagement with our Faith Info team. And we are a part of the Love of Church at the National Ministry Setting of the United Church of Christ. I use they, them pronouns, and today am wearing a dark blue blouse with gold-rimmed glasses. I have a short blonde pixie haircut, and I am wearing silver long earrings with blue and purple clay squares that are attached. Nurture the Soul is a weekly webinar that provides our local churches and faith practitioners with multitudes of practical, educational, innovative, and formational resources to engage with the critical topics of our time, to center care, and to educate the people of God. From cultural and community organizing to congregational leadership, from worship and theology to resourcing our small and rural churches, and from ministry with youth and children to a wide array of justice issues. We feature guest speakers, artists, authors, key leaders, theologians, historians, and so much more. Nurture the Soul is a webinar that stays current to how the gospel is alive in this time. We hope that you find this virtual digital space as a space of connection, community, and nurture, because we believe in the collective movement towards the world that God imagines for all of us. We invite you every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Nurture the Soul. And from time to time, look for special offerings. And you can find these offerings, whether they be on Thursdays or Mondays of this election season, on our website at www.ucc.org/events or on all of our social media platforms. And beloveds, if these conversations move you, if what's offered here today enhances your ministry, your soul, or even your brain, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting the letters UCC to numbers 41444. It is your financial support that helps programs like this continue in the essential work of the United Church of Christ. And we also invite you to share this webinar. If you signed up and registered, you will get a follow-up email with resources and a recording. Please do forward that to someone that you think might be interested. But before I introduce this week's guest, I'd like to remind you of a couple features on Zoom. The first is the chat feature, where you can share where you're zooming in from, what your faith community is, and you can even consider continuing the conversation amongst each other in that chat feature. That is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It is a dialogue bubble with an ellipses. Those are the three dots in the middle. If you click on that, a chat screen will come up on one of the panels, typically the right panel of your Zoom screen, and you can chat there. We also invite you to use a Q&A feature in order to ask questions that might arise during this webinar. Again, you can find that button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It is that dialogue bubble, but this time it has a question mark. And we will do our best at trying to get to those questions. Well, beloveds, I don't know about you, but with November 5th fast approaching, it can be difficult to keep election anxiety at bay. And I trust that I'm not the only one that might feel a hint of anxiety this year. The past few years have demonstrated how this time, the time between right before the presidential election, and then the inauguration, can be uncertain, chaotic, and even scary. And apropos for our theme today, the best way for Halloween to keep those scaries away is to have a plan in place. And as a church, for many, there are scenarios that could play out leading up to Inauguration Day. And so today we are joined by an amazing array of human beings that can help us understand what's next. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, another amazing human being, Reverend Michael, who is from our DC offices. And I must tell you, it is such a pleasure to be in these learning spaces alongside Michael. And so now, Michael, I turn it over to you. Thank you so much for making this possible today.
Thank you, Ellie, and thanks to each of you for being here today. The work of justice, as we know, really starts with simply showing up, choosing not to turn away from challenges and injustice, but rather committing to show up and leaning in with faith and with courage. And this webinar is an example of that today. It is part of our United Church of Christ, Our Faith, Our Vote campaign, which is our nonpartisan election education and engagement effort led out of our Washington, D.C. office. Thanks to so many of you for engaging with us in this journey and for doing your own election work in your communities. My friends, it matters. We're going to put in the chat now a few of the final events that we're planning over these next few days, namely this Sunday, which is Vote Faithfully Sunday. So lots of great materials, worship materials that we've created. And then on Tuesday, on Election Day, we're planning an Election Day prayer vigil with UCC leadership, as well as collecting prayers of the people to be shared from 4 to 6 p.m. next Tuesday. Today, my friends, as Ellie said, this is an opportunity for us to lean into the fears and anxieties together that so many of us harbor as we inch ever so closely to Election Day, Tuesday, November 5th. And as a reminder, if you haven't already, go vote, go make a plan to vote that day. We need your voice. And go vote with love as the theme for our Faith, Our Vote campaign. Today, we're going to hear a message that is a little bit different from so many of the narratives that we hear on our nightly news, which is that despite the real challenges to our democracy and the disturbing examples of some who are seeking to misinform, to disrupt, and even undermine the election, the reality is that these efforts are also being countered by so many more who are working to protect our democracy, to counter misinformation, and who are preparing to disrupt and de-escalate election sabotage and political violence in our communities. And my friends, you can be part of that work, and many of you are part of that work. As we highlight what is being done and what you can do to prepare, not just on Tuesday, but even more so over the weeks and months to come, our hope as a team is that our collective fears and anxieties might be reduced, knowing that we are in this together and have the resources that we need. So to get us started, we're going to first hear from one of the foremost experts on these issues, Chris Crawford. Chris is a policy strategist at Protect Democracy, where he focuses on ensuring free and fair elections and the peaceful transfer of power. He's also staff to the National Task Force on Election Crises and manages the Faith in Elections Playbook in partnership with Interfaith America. Chris was not able to join us in person today. He's being pulled in many directions, but he recorded a video for us that lays out what to expect in the weeks and months to come. So I'll turn it over to Chris.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you as you prepare for the 2024 election. I'm sorry that I couldn't be with you live, but I am happy to answer any follow-up questions that you have via email. I am going to try to open my slides here and get us started. What I'd like to do today is just walk you through the election process, the stages, potential disruptions that we might face, and most importantly, to equip you with what you need to be leaders in your community to ensure a free and fair election and a peaceful transfer of power. One of the things to understand about this election and the potential disruption in the post-election process is that we need to win the narrative every day and make the case for our election system and our democracy every day between now and inauguration, and I think we're up for the task. So before I get into the details of the timeline, I want to give some key messages throughout the process that you'll see throughout my presentation. So key messages: promote peace, calm, and patience. Call for everyone, every eligible voter to be able to cast their ballot and for every vote to be counted. Provide nonpartisan, accurate information to your networks, and then set expectations about potential challenges or delays in the electoral process, which we'll get into in detail in just a few minutes. What you're seeing here is a roadmap that the National Task Force on Election Crises has put together. That's our guide taking us through from the conventions through to Inauguration Day. And today we're going to talk about some of the different sections here. By the time we're watching this, we will be past the pre-election period and we will actually be into the mail-in voting and early voting period. But the pre-election period is where really our elections are set up and secured and people are recruited to staff them. So it's just important to understand. We'll breeze over it a little bit here, but it's important to understand a lot of work goes into securing our elections and the process. And so we want to keep that in mind as we make our way through the rest of this roadmap. When we talk about mail-in voting, there are different rules in different states on how this is governed. Everywhere you have to prove who you are in order to register to vote, and there are safeguards in place when you request your ballot. Many people can track your ballots on state websites. And then also it's important to understand that the voting lists are kept up to date to prevent people from trying to vote twice, once by mail and once in person. And then deadlines vary for mail-in voting. Some states require you to get your ballot in by election day. Other states require them to be postmarked by election day. So it's crucial that we check our local information to make sure that we understand the rules and our context. Some of the potential challenges in the mail-in voting period. The one I want to highlight here is USPS disruptions. If there is bad weather or other delays, we want to make sure that we're prepared for that. We also could see mistakes or technical issues. We see all the time people get the wrong ballot, ballot that's not for them sent to their address or something like that. Again, there are laws and safeguards in place to make sure that voters are who they say they are. As far as what you can do during the mail-in voting period, the most important one I want to flag here is encouraging folks to get their mail-in ballots in as soon as possible and to track their ballots. The USPS suggests that you get your ballots in a week before they're due so that they are certain to arrive on time. This is really important for states with some of the more strict deadlines. And then we get into early voting and election day. Some of the safeguards in place here: states utilize in-person voting for early voting in some places, and others you can drop off a mail ballot early. These are staffed by poll workers from both political parties when you're voting in person. There are lots of aspects that are open to the public or observers. In some states, anybody can go serve as an election observer. In others, you have to register, but they're very public, and there's ways for both parties and people of all ideologies to make sure the process is working well. And then it's important to remember on election day, as we're casting our votes and waiting for the results, that results aren't official when they're called by the networks. They're official when they're certified. Some of the things we're worried about here: intimidation or clashes at polling locations. We really want to make sure that our polling locations, our election system, is a place of peace. In America, we don't have violence at polling locations. We do not allow things like that in our country. People have been working extremely hard to secure our election process and to ensure an environment of peace. What can you do in early voting and on election day? I have listed here a few different days where you can celebrate our democracy, try to get people excited about voting. And again, you see this urging calm, patience, and trust in the process. I also would add, call on candidates to accept the will of the voters even before election day. This is something we should be asking candidates about, especially candidates on our own side who we might be voting for, no matter which party we belong to. Then after voting is done, we get into the period of time that we used to not really think much about, but I think is top of mind following what happened in the 2020 election. What we have after the polls close is the counting process and the certification process. Each state has different recount rules. A lot of them, it's if the race is within 0.5%, there's an automatic recount. States have different processes to audit to make sure that the results are accurate. And then things get handed to the certification process, where certifying bodies in different counties certify the results of the election. Results are checked often at the precinct, the county, and the state level. And then at the end of that process, it's usually governors that transmit the certificates and appoint the electors who technically in the Electoral College cast the votes for president. One item that we want to zoom in on as some of the potential developments that could happen are people who are members of these certifying bodies refusing to certify the election. They actually do not have the latitude to overturn the will of the people or to refuse to do that job. It's sort of like if you think about the rule of a scorekeeper in a basketball game. After the process is complete, they make sure that they have the right tally of the points. They are not referees, they're not the players. There are other bodies who oversee the election. The certifiers by law have to certify the results of the election as long as the process is followed to bring it to them to do their duty. And we need to educate people because I'm not sure everyone is aware of that fact. What you can do during this period, the biggest thing is educating your network and encouraging officials to count every vote. We don't want the count to be paused. We want every eligible vote to be counted. And then the next stage in the process is the actual electors meet on December 17th. There's a new law, the Electoral Count Reform Act, that lays out the clear processes and deadlines. It also creates a process for expedited judicial review if there are disputes. And it also stops legislatures from trying to claim that they have their own slate of electors in an effort to try to overturn the will of the people. One of the results of this reform is that it sets this day, December 17th, nationwide for the electors to meet. The implication of that is that there might be subversion attempts that try to get people to miss the ECRA deadlines and potentially disrupt the process on December 17th. So that's something that we will be watching to try to make sure that the process goes off as smoothly as possible. During this time, you should call out attempts to delay the process. You should prepare for attempts to potentially disrupt that process and urge calm, patience, and trust. And I would say contact your public officials and call on them to ensure that the process and the rule of law are followed. And then the last step in the process here is Congress getting together and convening on January 3rd. January 3rd, we have to remember, this will be the new members of Congress who are elected in November will take office on January 3rd. Then they will meet on January 6th and they'll count the votes. That's the role that the Constitution gives them. And I've got some things on the screen here on some of the new things that the ECRA reform did. One of the most important ones is it further clarified the vice president's role is ministerial. They don't get to personally reject votes. It also makes it so objections have to be made by 1/5 of each chamber in Congress in order to be sustained. And so there are new pieces in place that Congress worked on a bipartisan basis to further secure this process. Unfortunately, we know some of the risks of what could happen on this day. Members of Congress could face threats or intimidation to try to overturn the will of the people. There also are risks that on January 3rd, the House might not be able to completely convene. And so we want to be preparing for these things by sharing accurate information publicly, educating the public, and calling on members of Congress to fulfill their constitutional and legal duty, and again, urging calm, patience, and trust in the process. And then at the end of that time, we will look forward to the inauguration of a new president on January 20th, who will reflect the will of the voters and the rules of the process. I hope this is the start of our conversation. I will send around the slides so that you all have them on hand. And I also have my email here, chris.crawford@protectdemocracy.org, because I also want to be your guide throughout this process. And so thank you again for the opportunity to be with you. I hope this was helpful. God bless you all.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Cheryl Leanza. Cheryl, can
Great.
you?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chris, for that great presentation. Thanks, Mike, for introducing us all. Hi, I am Cheryl Leanza. I work for the United Church of Christ Media Justice Ministry. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a white 50-year-old woman with dark gray hair. And in honor of it being Halloween today, I have a red Newsboy Taylor Swift hat on. To kind of keep with the theme of today. So I appreciate so much having everybody here, and wanted to tell you more about our work. So UCC Media Justice, some of you may have known us by our old name, OC Inc. My ministry, we work alongside Mike's great work at the national setting in the DC office. Our sole focus is communications rights and media justice, and we are as old as the denomination. Almost at the beginning of the denomination, the original director of communications, Everett Parker, created this ministry. And in his day, at his time, he took on the media behemoths of his time, which was TV. He went in to monitor and collect data and look at television stations. He particularly focused on one TV station in the South that was not serving the Black Americans in their community. He had local people collect the data, and then collected that data and went to the federal authorities and documented the problems. After he documented the problems, the agency didn't work, and then he went to court. And we didn't go to court just once, but we went 2 times. And there's famous cases called the United Church of Christ versus the Federal Communications Commission because of the work that the predecessors in our ministry and our denomination did together to be sure that those media outlets were responsible for the communities they serve. So today we're continuing to do that same work. We do everything from helping to make sure that phone calls to people who are incarcerated or at affordable rates and prices. We also are doing the work that we do today, that we're focusing on today, making sure that large social media companies and others are accountable during our election period to make sure that people have the information they need so that they can vote. I would encourage you to visit our website, which is uccmediajustice.org. We have a blog post that we did in collaboration with the great Our Faith, Our Vote program, talking about the importance of the media and sharing additional resources that we have. Like we have our No Peace Online campaign, which has got great resources that you can use all year round, but are also really relevant during the election season. So as a part of our work at the national level in Washington, D.C., UCC Media Justice works closely with our civil rights partners and also with a great partner who I'm so delighted is here today, Common Cause. Common Cause is I saw some of the folks in the chat were sharing that our vote 88866, our vote number. That is one of the great collaborative efforts that we have out to make sure that elections are safe and protected, and Common Cause is a really key player there. And I'm so pleased, we have Raelyn Roberson, who has been working as a digital activist since 2020. She joined Common Cause, and everybody who I work with immediately sat up and took notice because Raelyn knows how to get things done, knows how to clearly explain things for you. And I want you all to be ready because you're going to take action. Raelyn will make sure that you know how to take action together. What we're going to learn about is we're going to learn how to get good information. We're going to learn how to tell bad information from good information and what to do when there's bad information. We're going to know how to share good information and feed the good algorithms and starve the bad algorithms. That's all Raelyn's doing, and it's really exciting. So I want to be sure that you're ready to help share some positive information as she goes ahead as they go ahead in their presentation. And I wanted to just finally say thank you so much for everybody for coming. And it's so great to be here today, as Michael was talking about, let's do something besides doom scrolling and worrying. Let's really take action today together, and that's what we can do. So Raelyn, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. Hey y'all, I'm Raelyn Roberson, she, they pronouns, and I'm the Media and Democracy campaigner at Common Cause. I have shoulder length red braids. I have a witch hat because it is Halloween, my favorite season, and I have sun and moon earrings on to really get into the spirit, and I am holding a brown wizard's wand. So how is that for a visual description? But thank you so much for having me here. And I want to quickly introduce Common Cause. As Cheryl mentioned, we are a partner of many amazing organizations and churches like the UCC who are working to make sure that folks in their community have information on how, when, and where to vote. And Common Cause specifically, we are a nonpartisan grassroots organization of experts, researchers, citizen watchdogs, lawyers, activists, and we're all dedicated to upholding the core values of American democracy, meaning democracy that we all can trust and all feel like we have equal participation in and where our voice matters. And thank you for plugging that 866-R vote hotline, because as a part of our work at Common Cause, every election season, we are partnering with folks across the country, especially the Lawyers Committee, who are trained professionals to answer these questions about how, when, and where to vote. Am I eligible to vote? Can I still vote? And oftentimes the answer is yes, but this information is not readily accessible to all folks. So we're really grateful to trusted messengers like yourselves who continue to amplify these resources out within your communities. So you just see a few pictures on the screen of our amazing election protection volunteers. They're out in the field, they're on the ground, they're making phone calls, they're answering phone calls, and they're just doing everything they can right now to make sure that everyone has the information they need and the support they need to go cast their votes. But I want to specifically talk about mis and disinformation and how that can really leave people disenfranchised without the information they need to vote. And as a part of the collaboration with the United Church of Christ, in our off season, off of the election season, we're often working to hold these media platforms accountable, whether it's social media, whether it's these news broadcasters. We're trying to hold them accountable for making sure that we have an information landscape and information ecosystem that is free and fair for all voters. However, that is unfortunately not the case in 2024. And we just want to make sure that all of you know that there are information gaps that are leaving marginalized voters vulnerable to disinformation right now. And to talk more about what that looks like, it looks like the fact that over 50% of Americans do get their news and information on social media. And I know for those of us who do not do that, you may think, why would anyone do that? And that is because devices are expensive. Sometimes people only have access to their phone and the information they can readily access on the apps on their phone. And we also still know that around 1 in 5 or 20% of this country do not have access to home internet or strong local news that can tell them how, when, and where to vote. And so that just means that a lot of folks are existing in news deserts, and that's going to be most likely to impact marginalized communities. So folks who are living in rural places, folks who are living on tribal lands, folks who are in Black, Latina communities, and folks who are in underserved communities across the country. And we also know on top of this that our bad actors and our social media platforms are making a lot of money off of disinforming and confusing voters. So bad actors may be broadcasting and trying to get clicks and views and people to come and listen to their podcasts. And we know that they get a lot of money from that traffic. So all those clicks and views actually goes to enrich them. So giving them more airtime is really giving them a lot of profit at the moment. And because of this profit incentive, we know that major social media platforms have actually moved away from enforcing those civic integrity policies that say things like, there is not allowed to be hate speech on our platform. There's not allowed to be calls for violence around the election on our platform. And there's not allowed to be any intentional confusion and disinforming of voters on our platform. So since we know that our platforms have stepped back away from doing that, we are not just going to throw our hands up. We know that we can take action, and we have a strategy that really works. And it's called inoculation content. And that's just content that's specifically designed to prime someone against falling for disinformation narratives before they see them. So the idea is that we post very beautiful, bright graphics like these all over our social media to try to drown out disinformation while informing our communities of their rights. So for example, the inoculation content that you see on your screen right now, the first one says some things are worth the wait. So this is meant to empower a voter who is in line, knowing that if you're in line, stay in line, you have the right to cast your ballot. This empowers that voter to know that it is worth the wait to vote. And this is to combat the disinformation that sometimes tells folks that they should not be doing this, or to try to let people know that they have this right in case anyone tries to tell them that they do not. And then the next one, we have tech issues may happen when voting. Stay calm, don't give up, ask a poll worker for help. We know that anytime we use technology, whether it's user error or just the actual technology itself, mistakes may happen. And this particular inoculation content is meant to show that person that their poll worker is a resource, someone who is there to help them cast their vote, and someone they should ask for support. So this is really to make sure that people feel confident and secure in their vote, because we know disinformers often try to make us not feel that our vote is counted or there's something nefarious going on. But there's also something new in our information ecosystem, not necessarily all the way new, but definitely way more prevalent than it used to be in previous years. And that's the social media algorithm. And not just on social media, algorithms in general exist on Google when we go to just use any search engines. And these are just rules and signals for using our data, our information, to determine how content is ranked, filtered, and recommended to us. So for example, if we all looked up the word vote right now, we're all going to get different results based on our location. And when it comes to more less specific things like voting or more specific things, they are also using things like our age. So they might try to market something differently to someone who of a different age. And this one is especially important for all of us on the call today. Our political and religious identity, from what the algorithm can determine based on who we're following, what we're engaging with, is also used to target content to us online. And what our friends and family post online also determines what we're able to see online as well. If you're watching things on YouTube or TikTok or any kind of Reels, video-based platform, the amount of time you're actually looking at this content is something that the algorithm uses to determine if someone is interested in it. But the biggest thing is engagement. So anytime there's a like, a click, a share, that is just what the algorithm needs to determine, is this something that I should share to more people like you? And now that we know how that algorithm is kind of working, we want to now make sure that you know the difference between mis and disinformation. Not all election lies are the same online, and we like to make sure to take special care in explaining that to folks, especially as our digital activists are volunteers who are looking for disinformation in their own communities. And again, as this is a nonpartisan volunteer effort, we're only looking for mis and disinformation geared on how, when, where to vote, or the logistics and mechanics of voting. But understanding the motivation behind the different election lies we see online can help us be a lot more effective in how we respond to them. So first of all, election disinformation. This is something that's going to be very intentional on the part of the person who shared it and amplified it and created it. So it's a very intentional attempt to cause harm by using false information to affect the participation of voters in an election. So this can look like your conspiracy theories. It's going to look like uses of intimidation. And the important thing to note here is that our disinformers are looking for you to react and engage. So they're going to use inflammatory language. They're going to try to target your community in ways that make you react first and think later. And then on the other hand, there is misinformation. And so this is when somebody accidentally shares something that is inaccurate about our elections. And I will say it right now, I've shared misinformation. You probably have shared misinformation, especially folks, as we get closer to the elections. We're trying to be helpful in getting out all the information we can about how, when, and where to vote, and even possibly what to vote for. However, sometimes whenever we don't have all of the facts, or maybe we've fallen for disinformation narratives ourselves, we can share something that's incorrect. And this can also look like a minor typo. So for example, if I'm trying to share an address to a polling location and I type just one letter wrong, we know that that will send someone to a completely wrong address. So even though it's not intentional, it can still work to disenfranchise a voter or make it to where their vote does not count. And again, as I said earlier, anyone can fall victim to misinformation because we know that social media platforms have basically abandoned their duty to moderate inaccurate election content. We know that there is a widespread lack of news and internet access in this country, and we know that disinformation is being supercharged by recommendation algorithms and generative AI. So if you see misinformation being spread by your loved ones or your friends or folks in your congregation, you're able to certainly react in very effective ways, especially as a trusted messenger. So you can share election information. So you can take this opportunity to post facts online or share them with them face to face if you're having a conversation. You can have an election conversation. As a part of our resources, we give our digital activists, and I think it should also be in the resource hub. There are tools and things to say, conversation starters, and even conversation enders for having these conversations about online election disinformation. And then lastly, the most effective thing you can do is correct or remove your own misinformation. Say, oops, I got that wrong, or just delete it and post information in its wake. But on the other hand, disinformation is something that we never want to engage with because, again, remember that algorithm is just looking for that click, that like, that share, that comment, or even you looking at it for too long to say that this is something that should be shared to more people. So do not engage, even if you're trying to debunk the claim, because again, the algorithm doesn't know the difference between positive and negative interaction. It just sees someone's talking to this and maybe it wants more eyes on it. And so if you're going to post information or something that corrects that claim, you should do it separately. And this way, you're not actually putting disinformation in front of your loved ones who might not have ever seen it in the first place. And then don't cross post things. So if you see something outrageous on Facebook or Nextdoor, you leave it right over there. And because if you take a screenshot and you post it to another platform, you are helping to spread the message that the disinformer is trying to propagate in your community. And so instead, you can report those things to us at our tip line at reportdisinfo.org. It is open 24/7, 365 days a year. And we are looking at these tips coming in from folks like you in your communities who just see something that isn't quite right on social media or in person. You send it to us, and then we make sure to go into it and get to the bottom of what is going on here. But I mentioned that there is also another thing that you can do, and it's the action that we're about to take together right now. And that's to share inoculation content. So right now I have up on our screen our inoculation library. And here we have specially crafted messages and posts that you can share on your social media. So I want to just hop right over to Stop Disinfo and to show you what one of these might look like if you were to share it on your social media. Sorry, my computer wants to be a tiny bit slow. I want to check into the chat. I see folks talking about the internet access and their cellular access in their communities. Yes, it is not equal all across the board, but I do want to make sure that I can show you at least one of these. Here we go. So if you'd like to share something like this on your social media or on your email, that is something that you can certainly do at our inoculation website. And let me show you how to do this, how to access this site. And so this is one of the tools that we give out to all of our digital activists, and we have it up on the screen for you right now. So if you want to pull out your cell phone and open up your camera app, or you can click the link that I'm about to drop in the chat. And from here, you can go ahead and share inoculation content either to your social media, or you can even just click a button to email it to your loved ones. And remember, these inoculation messages have been specifically crafted by anti-disinformation and election experts to not give any extra air to disinformation narratives while making sure that our social media feeds are decorated with very pro-democracy, pro-voter, assertive of your rights information. In the stead, we know that this is something that we feel called to do, and this is something that we can do kind of picking up digital litter. But I also want to say that this is something that we're doing in the gap of lack of platform action and accountability. And so I just want to affirm that, yes, this does sometimes feel like it should not be our jobs, but we thank everyone who takes the time to amplify messages like these in their communities because they make a real difference and they do a lot to stop the harms of widespread mis and disinformation about our elections. So I'm going to leave this up here for maybe just one more minute. So go ahead and just take that screenshot or take out the QR code to scan. And or you can just click the link that we add in the chat or in the resources later on. And please give our inoculation content a share to your spaces. And what we will say is, again, this stuff really does work, especially in the negative energy that we often see online. People are looking for positive content about our elections to engage with. People are looking for information to share with their loved ones that they know is verified and will not contain anything that makes their loved one unable to vote. So just feel confident when sharing inoculation content like this in social media. And I've even seen people print it out, put up posters around, and that's just one of the many actions that we do as digital democracy activists. But I do want to plug that we have a meeting tonight. We're saying I ain't scared no trolls. We have things to do, and we have actions that we can take to stop the spread of election mis and disinformation online. So there is yet another QR code, and there's another link in the chat for how to become a digital democracy activist and how to access all of these links and tools. And also just to be in community with all the other people who are taking these actions to make online a better, more fair and equitable space as we are approaching this very huge election. But leaving this up for a second, but that is officially the end of what I had to say. If you do sign up for a meeting, I look forward to seeing you there. If not, I will be looking at all of this inoculation content that's being posted on social media and hoping to give it some likes, shares, loves, so I can make sure that we help that algorithm share it to even more people and ignore that disinformation. But I will pass it back over to whoever is going next.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Good afternoon, folks. My name is Abigail Cipparone, and I am the Domestic Policy Advocate here in the UCC DC office. Thank you so much to Raelyn for getting started on concrete steps that we can take to protect democracy. As we have seen, we are facing extraordinary threats to our democracy this election season. And there's definitely a risk of election sabotage, which is any sort of interference meant to undermine the will of the people in an election. So Chris has reviewed the election timeline, outlined some risks, and offered some best practices when protecting democracy. Raelyn has drilled down on how to respond to mis and disinformation. I am going to wrap us up by offering some ways that you as people of faith and as members of congregations can respond to election sabotage if it does happen in your community. The basics of what I discussed this afternoon is in the Don't Be Scared, Be Prepared election resource that the DC office recently published that Hannah is going to put in the chat. Before I get started, I want to assure you that we can work together to protect our democracy over the next few weeks. And there is room for all of us. Some of you may be great at social media and be able to correct misinformation and cut through violent rhetoric that way. Some may be volunteering as a poll worker or getting your friend or family member to the polls. Some may be ready to join a prayer vigil or join another event that brings democracy and faith in democracy to your state capitol or to your polling location. Our power is through our community, and we can count on each other. So we as faith communities have a few superpowers that help us be prepared for whatever happens from now until the presidential inauguration. People of faith like us are seen as trusted messengers for spreading information. We can cut through partisanship and unite people around a common value like nonviolence or counting every ballot. We also know how to redirect towards positive sentiments, and we have healing practices within our tradition that will be invaluable over the course of this season. Congregations also normally have buildings that can be used as sanctuaries or organizing spaces. And congregations are able to turn out people to events due to their strong organizational networks. So to prepare for election sabotage, you do want to make sure you are prioritizing safety. We recommend that everyone know basic de-escalation techniques during this time from the election through the presidential inauguration. You can use the Bridging Divides Initiative website that Hannah is linking in the chat to search for de-escalation trainings near you, or if you need a virtual resource, Hannah will also put in the chat a de-escalation training provided by the Election Learning Lab as a first step. While this is geared towards election workers, this training reviews the skills that you will need to stay safe. I also want to make sure that you have in the chat the UCC Insurance Board's resource that was first circulated in 2020 about best practices to ensure any church buildings remain free from damage. Now, there are a few things congregations themselves can do to be most prepared from November 5th through January 20th. First, I would recommend that you organize some sort of election response committee. This could be the same group of people who ran your voter registration campaign, or it could be your ministerial leadership team or a social action committee. Then encourage this committee to offer themselves as a resource to voters who face issues on election day and as a source of trusted information for the church. Encourage this committee to reach out to your pro-democracy allies. Are there nonprofits or faith communities nearby that would be interested in working with you on something like this? And then try to connect with your local governmental leadership as well, so you can work to provide them with and receive trusted information. Finally, I would suggest that you should have this committee look into if there have been previous instances of election sabotage or political violence in your community. Who are the perpetrators and what did they do? So the goal of responding to election sabotage is to make it inconvenient or politically risky for the sabotage to continue. We do this in two main ways, through messaging and direct response. So as we saw in the previous presidential election, violent rhetoric can trigger election sabotage and political violence. But we can all play a role in weakening the power of this rhetoric by disrupting the perpetrator's narrative. Raelyn has got us started on how to combat mis and disinformation, so I'm going to just quickly go through how to disrupt rhetoric meant to trigger political violence, such as what we saw a few years back on January 6th, and how to message in response to election sabotage in your community, such as voter intimidation or certification challenges. We need to follow these steps when communicating with the public. 1, confirm our shared values. 2, call out the election sabotage. 3, state the truth or correct any misinformation or disinformation that may occur. 4, contextualize the election sabotage. And then 5, reconfirm that shared value. So let's see how this framework can be applied to a scenario in which there's been a certification challenge in your community due to unfounded claims of non-citizens voting. How can we disrupt the narrative to respond to election sabotage? Okay. So first, confirm our shared value. So it could be something like, as people of faith, we value our democratic process and the will of the people. Next, call out the sabotage by saying something like, election deniers continue to mislead the public using anti-immigrant sentiments to dispute the results and deny the will of the people. Then correct any misinformation or confusion surrounding certification by saying something like, certification cannot change the results of the election. And then contextualize the sabotage by saying, these falsehoods are part of a broader strategy of anti-voter actors to undermine confidence in our elections so they can overturn the election results. And then finally, reconfirm the shared value by saying, in America, the people decide the outcome of elections, not the election deniers who attempt to overturn results they don't like. The script that you see here demonstrates how to disrupt the narrative when it comes to a certification dispute brought through claims of non-citizen voting, and there's actually a script for each of the primary election sabotage risks at the link that Hannah is going to put in the chat. So strong on-the-ground response will also help make election sabotage both inconvenient and politically risky. How we can do this is by creating events in our community, either close to where the election sabotage is occurring or at a place in our community that symbolizes our democracy. These events should be planned with a combination of some of these core ingredients. So first, we should draw on widely shared values to justify the event and draw a sharp contrast with those who oppose you. So, for example, if there has been violence at the polls and we want to draw on the widely shared value of nonviolence, you could host a prayer vigil for nonviolence. It's also recommended to invoke humor or fun or festive atmosphere to defray political tensions and reframe this election as a celebration of our democracy. One example that actually happened last election was a church hosted a dance party at the polls, and that created a fun atmosphere that really encouraged a celebration of democracy. And then finally, including a constructive, positive, or service-oriented element to your actions can also help. So offering food, shelter, or spiritual care to voters or election officers. Here are just some other ideas for direct on-the-ground response. I would say with each of these, I do recommend that if the election sabotage has targeted a certain community, to try to center that community in a potential event if possible, so that you can redeem and humanize them. Some examples are peaceful witness, so standing with signs surrounding nonviolence, the importance of protecting democracy, a prayer vigil, a dance party, again, something celebratory, a concert, similarly celebratory for democracy, a press conference, which can, again, kind of face that narrative, disrupt that narrative, and an art build, so helping people use their hands to create something new. So if there is election sabotage, another democracy protection group or faith community may already be planning a response. So ensure that you coordinate with them before going out alone. There's definitely strength in numbers in this work. And if you would like to get looped into election response actions already happening in your area, please email me. I will be able to connect you with faith organizing in the Election Sabotage Response Network, as well as a few local state-based networks, depending on the state, that are already doing this work and maybe thinking about how to respond already. I know that particularly faith organizing in the Election Sabotage Response Network is recruiting faith leaders right now to participate in actions across the country. So we do have to prepare for backlash from perpetrators of election sabotage when they see us respond. You can read this list for yourself on how they are likely to do that, but the main way to resist backlash here is to not directly engage, but to continue producing either on-the-ground responses or messaging that disrupts violent rhetoric. So before I wrap up, I do want to give specific advice on if you experience any trouble at all voting, and that includes threats, violence, or intimidation. So first, call that election protection hotline. I know we've mentioned it multiple times, but that's just because it is of high importance to remember that number. And there you will be able to access legal assistance, and this will help election experts also across the country focus on keeping our polls safe and understand and map threats. Also, the Department of Justice has designated district election officers and its 94 U.S. attorney offices around the country to be the local point of contact for complaints surrounding intimidation, threats, or violence at the polls. So once you have called the election protection hotline to get advice, you can report the incident to the DOJ by calling the number on this slide or by filing a complaint online at the link on the screen, which Hannah is also going to provide in the chat. So this election season is going to be heavy for many. Hannah is going to put in the chat a spiritual care package that Join the Movement for Racial Justice has made that you can use to ground yourself during this time. And I do want to encourage you in this work to step away and rest when you need to rest. The work is ongoing and will continue after the election is over. So please pace yourself and lean on your community for support. Thank you so much for being with us today, and I am going to pass it back to Mike.
Thank you, Abigail, and to all our presenters today. I recognize this is a lot of information. I know that in the Q&A section, one of the main questions is, can we have this information sent out afterwards? Yes, You'll receive an email with lots of follow-up information, the links that were shared, the slideshow, as well as a recording of the webinar itself. And I know it's a lot to absorb all of this at once, but really to try and just distill it down to a couple things to take with you. I saw someone else put something similar in the chat, but really just to remember to be a source of trusted information, that we already are and function as churches and as faith leaders, to have a plan, to use the resources that were just shared, to develop that plan, to use the election protection hotline that Abigail just reminded us of. And particularly for those of you that are around state capitals, around December 15th is a time that we are anticipating some potential efforts of disruption. So for you to have a plan, particularly around state capitals and around that specific date. And really with all of this, to remember to lean on our networks, lean on the organizations highlighted today, lean on the local networks that you have in your local community. Reach out to our office. We are more than happy to be a resource to you. As Abigail said, we're going to be monitoring the Faith Election Sabotage Response Network and can convey resources and data to you. We are also at the national level of UCC. We've had conversations and will be having conversations around how do we share this information better together. So there's a lot to take away. I did want to there's been a couple questions that have come in through the chat of clarification and resources. And I wondered maybe, particularly for you, either Raelyn or Cheryl, one question that Elizabeth offered was, how do you report online hate speech and violent threats? What is that mechanism or process that you would most recommend? Raelyn or Cheryl, would you be interested in answering that?
Yeah, I can hop in and answer that. So if you're seeing something that just completely this is 100%, I know this is hate speech, I know this is targeting somebody, the best thing that you could do is to report it directly to the platform first, so that at least the algorithm knows that this is something it should create friction against and should not blast more. And then number two, you should report it to the Report Disinfo tip line so that we can analyze it and start developing pro-democracy proactive responses to it. And then number three, after you do those things, you close out of there. You do not engage any further and you take care of yourself, because seeing content like that, even though you might say it's just words, it does have an impact on our mental health and the way we view our democracy as well.
Yes. Thank you for that. I know we're basically at time. We'd hope to have a little bit more time for Q&A, but I really hope that in the context of this webinar that you feel better prepared. Again, the theme of this was don't be scared, be prepared. And so part of how we push back against those anxieties and fears that all of us have is in part to be better prepared, to have a plan, to know that we are in this together. And again, to highlight one more way in which we are going to reflect that togetherness is on election day. We will be gathering virtually for a prayer vigil from 4 to 6 p.m. We really hope that all will gather. We'll be gathered with our leadership, gathering voices and prayers from our churches. There will be a breakout room in that time around election protection. So if there are things that people have seen that day that want to report or asking for additional resources, there will be a breakout room from 5 to 6. Where myself and a few others will be available to field any of those questions. So we really want to be that resource to you. And again, we are so grateful for you being with us, for showing up, and for facing those fears directly, knowing that together we build hope. Turn it over to you, Ellie.
Wow. Just wow. Just the absolute brilliance of everybody here in this space. All of those that you have collaborated with over the many months, days, years, hours, minutes, whatever it is. I am just so eternally grateful for all that you have provided to those folks and to our folks here virtually today. What a gift it is to have you doing this work to make sure that our American democracy is one that still continues. And for those of you who are joining us virtually, and whether it be live now or at a later time, I just invite you to just settle in wherever it is that you find yourself at this moment. And I invite you to breathe. Take a look around you. Even if you're driving, it's okay. It's probably better to take a look around you, right? Making sure that you realize that you are present and alive in this world right now. There is no better time than the times that we have with us. Thank those who are in your life and who are doing this work. And for those poll workers, please do extend sincere gratitude to them as well. Beloveds, I want to say thank you again for joining us today, for our presenters. And we look forward to being with you all again next Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for part 1 of a 2-part series on disaster preparedness. Next week's webinar is with a colleague of mine who, again, I am so blessed to work in such a beautiful space with such wonderful, thoughtful, and intelligent people like Reverend Katie Howe, who is our Minister for Disaster Response and Recovery. And they're going to discuss how creating coalitions and community building during non-disaster times can help to co-create an environment where all people, if they experience a disaster, whether it is climate caused, human caused, technological, or whatever, that we do know that we indeed have each other. And she will be joined with by others to explore how building relationships is that vital first step. And so I look forward to seeing you all next week. I'm going to be in that virtual space with Michael and those as much as I can. And I just wish you so many blessings. And I would love to turn it over to Cheryl and her Taylor Swift hat to be able to take us out for a benediction.
Thank you so much, Reverend Ellie. Thank you so much for everyone being here, for all these resources that are going to take us through not only Election Day, but all the way through next January. Let us all pray together. God, help us, our neighbors, and our political leaders to put our love for our world into action. As we make sure that we cast our own votes and encourage our neighbors to do the same, let us be vigilant in verifying the information we share and courageous in confronting falsehoods. Call us to seek out truth and justice and educate ourselves in this critical time. Help us create a society where all people have access to reliable, trustworthy information from sources that are accountable to the communities that they serve. Give us the serenity to accept the results of our democratic elections and yet continue to work toward justice. Give us the courage to keep calm even when events around us are scary. We know that with each other and with our faith, we can work together for a just world for all. Amen.
Siblings in Christ, if you were moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.